My name is Alma Richards, and I'm 54 years old. Last Thanksgiving changed everything. One moment, I was passing the cranberry sauce, the next, my son. Nathan's hand struck my face with such force I fell sideways onto the table. The sound of shattering dishes was deafening, but not as shocking as the silence that followed. Everyone froze. My daughter Jessica, my ex-husband, David, his young girlfriend. What they didn't expect was my response. Instead of tears, I smiled. Instead of anger, I said, "Thank you." And in that moment, I watched confusion replace the hatred in my son's eyes. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to face family violence, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against abuse isn't fighting back. It's refusing to break. I've lived in the suburbs of Boston my entire life. The same neighborhood, actually, until 3 years ago, when my 25-year marriage to David Richards finally crumbled beyond repair. That's when I moved to a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town, leaving behind the 4-bedroom colonial where we'd raised our children and built what I had believed was a stable life. David and I met in college. He was charismatic, ambitious, and focused everything my parents wanted for me. I was young, impressionable, and desperate to escape my middle-class upbringing for something more exciting. David promised me the world, and for many years, he delivered on the material front. A beautiful home, nice cars, vacations to places I'd only dreamed about. What I didn't realize until much later was the price I was paying. "You're so lucky," my friends would say, admiring our seemingly perfect life. "David is so successful, and he takes such good care of you." They didn't see how he monitored our bank accounts to the penny, questioning every purchase I made. They didn't hear how he'd critique my appearance, my cooking, my parenting, always with that smile that said, "I'm just trying to help you be better." They certainly didn't witness how he'd twist my words during arguments until I was apologizing for things I hadn't done. "You're overreacting," he'd say whenever I expressed hurt or frustration. "You've always been too emotional. That's why I have to make the important decisions." Nathan was born 2 years after we married. From the beginning, David had definite ideas about raising a son. "He needs to be strong," David would insist, even when Nathan was just a toddler crying over a skinned knee. "Don't coddle him, Alma. You'll make him soft." Still, Nathan and I shared a special bond during his early years. He was a sensitive, thoughtful child with David's sharp intelligence, but a gentleness that was all his own. We would spend hours reading together, building elaborate Lego structures, or just talking about his day while I prepared dinner. Jessica came along 3 years later, and despite David's initial disappointment at having a daughter instead of another son, she quickly became Daddy's little girl. She had David wrapped around her finger in a way Nathan never managed, though that dynamic would shift dramatically as they entered their teenage years. As the children grew, I poured myself into being the perfect mother and wife. I volunteered at their schools, maintained our home, immaculately hosted dinner parties for David's business associates. I sublimated any career ambitions of my own to support David's rising star in the financial industry. When I did try to discuss returning to work once Jessica started school, David had a ready answer. "Why would you want to work some entry-level job when you can support this family by running our home? Do you know how many women would kill to be in your position?" And so, I stayed, telling myself it was for the best, that my children needed me at home, that David was right. I was lucky. The little voice inside that whispered, otherwise, grew fainter with each passing year. The trouble began in earnest when Nathan hit his teenage years. Always sensitive, he struggled with the transition to high school. His grades slipped, he became withdrawn, and David's response was to come down harder. "No son of mine is going to be mediocre," he declared during tense family dinners. "The Richards name stands for excellence." I tried to mediate to explain to David that Nathan needed support, not pressure. These attempts only resulted in David turning his criticism toward me. "This is why he's struggling, Alma. You've made him weak. Boys need a firm hand." Nathan's rebellion escalated. He began staying out late, answering in monosyllables when asked about school, and visibly flinching whenever David entered the room. By 16, the sweet boy who used to curl up beside me with books was unrecognizable, replaced by an angry young man who seemed to blame me as much as his father for his unhappiness. Jessica, meanwhile, had developed into a fiercely independent young woman. She maintained perfect grades, participated in numerous extracurriculars, and somehow managed to navigate David's controlling nature with a diplomatic skill I envied. She knew exactly when to stand firm and when to strategically retreat, a balance I had never mastered in my relationship with her father. "Mom," she said to me once when she was 15 and we were alone in the car, "why do you let Dad talk to you like that?" I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter, unsure how to respond. "Marriage is about compromise, Jess." She looked out the window. "Seems like you're the only one compromising." By the time Jessica was 16 and Nathan 19, my marriage had deteriorated to the point where David and I rarely spoke, except about practical matters. He traveled frequently for business, and I suspected there were other women, though I had no concrete evidence. What I did know was that I had become invisible in my own home, a ghost that prepared meals, did laundry, and maintained a facade of normalcy while dying inside. The breaking point came shortly after Nathan left for college. With both children out of the house, Nathan at university, and Jessica on a semester abroad program, David informed me one evening that he wanted a divorce. "I've given this family 25 years of my life," he said, not even looking up from his laptop. "I think I deserve some happiness now." I was simultaneously devastated and relieved. The prospect of starting over in my 50s terrified me, but the thought of continuing in this half-life was worse. The divorce was brutal. David, with his financial acumen and connections, managed to hide assets and minimize his financial obligations to me. After decades as a stay-at-home mother, my employment prospects were limited. I eventually found work as a social worker assistant, a field I'd always been interested in, but one that paid modestly at best. The worst part, however, was how David manipulated the children, particularly Nathan. He painted me as greedy, unstable, the villain who had forced his hand by being an inadequate wife. Nathan, already distant, fully embraced his father's narrative. Jessica was more skeptical, maintaining a relationship with both of us, while clearly seeing through many of David's tactics. I moved into my small apartment 3 years ago, taking only what I could definitively prove was mine to avoid further conflict. The first year of living alone was the hardest. After decades of defining myself as David's wife and Nathan and Jessica's mother, I struggled to rediscover who Alma Richards actually was. Slowly, though, I began to build a new life. My job, while challenging, gave me purpose. I made new friends, joined a book club, started taking walks along the harbor. I even dated occasionally, though none of the relationships progressed to anything serious. What mattered most was that for the first time in decades, I was making my own choices. David, meanwhile, wasted no time moving on. Within 6 months of our divorce being finalized, he was dating Lisa, a marketing executive 22 years his junior. According to Jessica, who maintained diplomatic relations with both households, Lisa moved into the family home shortly thereafter. Nathan, now firmly in his father's camp, rarely returned my calls and visited only when obligated by major holidays. Even then, our interactions were strained. His responses to my questions about school and his life curt and minimal. Each encounter left me drained and heartbroken, missing the little boy who once couldn't wait to tell me about his day. Which brings us to last Thanksgiving, the first major holiday since the divorce that David had insisted on hosting. In previous years, I had maintained the tradition in my apartment, with Jessica faithfully attending and Nathan making brief appearances. But David, perhaps wanting to showcase his new life with Lisa, had declared that For the sake of family unity, we should all celebrate together at his home. It's just one dinner, Mom, Jessica had said when I expressed my reservations. I'll be there the whole time, and I think it might be good for Nathan to see us all getting along. I agreed, not for David's sake, or even my own, but in the hope that in neutral territory, with everyone on their best behavior, I might find a way to reconnect with my son. Looking back, I realize how naive that hope was. David had never been interested in peace unless it was entirely on his terms. I should have known he would use the occasion not for healing, but for another power play in our ongoing emotional chess match. And so, with a homemade pumpkin pie and a heart full of trepidation, I prepared to enter the lion's den that Thanksgiving morning, unaware that the day would mark both the lowest point in my relationship with Nathan and, paradoxically, the beginning of our path back to each other. I woke up that Thanksgiving morning with a knot of anxiety in my stomach that no amount of coffee could dissolve. The weather matched my mood, gray and drizzling with a biting wind that cut through my coat as I carried my pumpkin pie to the car. I had baked it the night before, using my mother's recipe, the same one I'd made for every Thanksgiving of my married life. It felt important somehow to bring this piece of continuity, this reminder of who I had been in that house for so many years. My phone pinged as I started the car. A text from Jessica. On my way to Dad's now. Nathan's flight got in late last night. Dad and Lisa are being weird. Brace yourself. I typed back, weird how? 3 dots pulsed for a moment before her reply. Lisa's trying too hard. Dad's in show-off mode. Nathan's sulking. The usual, but more so. I sighed and put the phone down. Jessica, my perpetual diplomat, was already at work setting expectations. I appreciated her efforts to buffer the inevitable tension, but they also heightened my apprehension. If Jessica felt the need to warn me before I'd even arrived, the atmosphere must be truly strained. As I drove, my mind drifted back to Nathan's behavior over the past 3 years. Since the divorce, David had worked systematically to cement Nathan's loyalty, using a combination of financial incentives, selective storytelling about our marriage, and subtle manipulation. Your mother never supported my career, he would tell Nathan. She resented my success. I wanted to do more with you as a family, but your mother preferred to keep to herself. I tried to make it work for decades, son, but there's only so much a man can take. These statements, which Jessica had reported back to me, were such skillful inversions of the truth that they were almost admirable in their calculation. David had always excelled at reshaping reality to suit his needs. The most painful development had been Nathan's increasing coldness toward me. At first, right after the separation, he had at least maintained a pretense of neutrality. But as months passed, his visits and calls became less frequent, his manner more distant. By the end of the first year, he was openly hostile, repeating David's narratives about my failures as a wife and mother. He'd stopped coming to my apartment altogether 6 months ago, agreeing to see me only in public places or at Jessica's university events. I don't want to be in the middle, Mom, he'd say when I tried to explain my side. I'm an adult now. I can see clearly what happened. But what he saw was only what David wanted him to see, a carefully curated version of our family history, with me cast as the villain and David as the long-suffering hero. I pulled onto David's street, where the houses seemed to have grown even larger and more imposing since I'd lived in the neighborhood. David had bought a new home after the divorce, a modern mansion that made our family home look modest by comparison. 6 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, and what Jessica described as a ridiculous infinity pool overlooking a carefully landscaped acre of property. Today, it was decorated for Thanksgiving, with tasteful fall wreaths and professionally arranged pumpkin displays flanking the grand entrance. I parked my 10-year-old sedan behind Jessica's compact car, feeling immediately out of place among the luxury vehicles filling the circular driveway. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the pie and my purse, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. I had taken extra care with my appearance today, wanting to project confidence and stability. My gray-streaked hair was styled simply but neatly. My makeup subtle but flattering. The navy blue dress I wore was new, one of the few splurges I'd allowed myself recently. Looking presentable felt like armor I desperately needed. Jessica opened the door before I could ring the bell, enveloping me in a tight hug. "You look beautiful, Mom," she whispered in my ear. "Don't let them get to you, okay?" I squeezed her back, grateful beyond words for her unwavering support. At 19, she displayed an emotional intelligence and strength that continually amazed me. She was studying psychology at Boston University, determined to understand family dynamics and perhaps make sense of her own upbringing. "The place is something," she added, ushering me inside. Something was an understatement. The foyer alone was larger than my entire apartment, with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and a chandelier that probably cost more than a year of my salary. The house smelled of expensive candles and traditional Thanksgiving fare, though I knew David had likely hired a caterer rather than cook himself. "Alma, you made it!" Lisa appeared from what I assumed was the kitchen, wearing an apron that looked brand new over a designer dress. At 32, she was beautiful in a polished catalog way, perfectly highlighted hair, carefully applied makeup, not a wrinkle in sight. She embraced me with the excessive enthusiasm of someone trying very hard to create the impression of warmth. "And you brought a pie. How sweet. We have a whole dessert spread, catered, but it's so nice to have something homemade too." I returned her hug stiffly, noting how she managed to both acknowledge and diminish my contribution in the same breath. "Happy Thanksgiving, Lisa. The house looks lovely." "Oh, this is just a temporary setup," she said with a dismissive wave. "We're renovating the kitchen after the holidays. David thinks the marble is too common." Jessica caught my eye and suppressed an eye roll. In our old home, David had insisted on that same common marble, overruling my preference for a more practical surface. "Where is everyone?" I asked, letting Jessica take the pie from my hands. "David's in his study on a call, some crisis with the Tokyo market apparently. Nathan's in the media room. Dinner's scheduled for 2. Lisa glanced at her watch. "David's mother should be arriving soon too." My stomach tightened further. Eleanor Richards had never approved of me viewing me as an inadequate match for her brilliant son. That she was included while none of my family had been invited was clearly another of David's calculated moves. "I'll put this in the kitchen and show Mom around," Jessica said deftly, extracting me from Lisa's performative hostessing. As we walked through the house, Jessica provided a running commentary in a low voice. "Lisa's been cooking and cleaning all morning, trying to impress Dad, but he barely notices. He's been on his phone most of the day, making sure everyone knows how important he is. Nathan arrived last night and went straight to the guest room. He and Dad had some intense conversation over breakfast, but they stopped when I walked in." "How does Nathan seem?" I asked, unable to hide my eagerness for information about my son. Jessica hesitated. "Angry, defensive. He's been checking his phone constantly and texting someone who keeps making him frown. I think he might have broken up with that girl he was seeing at school." We reached the kitchen, a vast space with top-of-the-line everything. Lisa was directing 2 catering staff who were arranging appetizers on silver platters. "I'll put your pie here, Mom," Jessica said, placing it on a counter far from the elaborate display of professional-looking desserts. "Thanks, honey. I think I'll say hello to Nathan before dinner." Jessica squeezed my arm. "Good luck. I'll be right behind you." I made my way to what Lisa had called the media room, which turned out to be a home theater, complete with reclining leather seats and a screen that took up an entire wall. Nathan sat alone in the dim room, illuminated only by the glow of a football game he didn't seem to be actually watching. His phone was in his hand, his attention fixed on the screen as his thumbs moved rapidly over the keys. "Nathan," I said softly from the doorway. He looked up, his expression immediately shuddering. At 22, he was the image of his father at that age, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same strong jawline and intense eyes. But where David's face in old photos showed confidence bordering on arrogance, Nathan's features were tight with something that looked like anxiety poorly masked as disdain. "Mom," he acknowledged flatly, not rising or making any move to embrace me. "Happy Thanksgiving." I entered the room, taking a seat a respectful distance from him. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. How was your flight?" "Fine." "And school, your classes this semester sounded challenging." He shrugged. "They're fine. Dad thinks I should be focusing more on finance courses if I want to work with him after graduation." I bit back a comment about how Nathan had once dreamed of becoming an architect, a path David had consistently discouraged as impractical. "What matters is what you want, Nathan," he scoffed. "What I want is to not have this conversation again. Dad's offering me a clear path to success. Why would I turn that down to chase some pipe dream? Architecture was hardly a pipe dream. You have real talent." "Had?" He interrupted. "I had talent, but talent doesn't pay the bills, does it? Not everyone can afford to pursue fulfilling careers that leave them barely making rent." The jab was clear, a reference to my current financial situation, which David had undoubtedly portrayed in the worst possible light. I swallowed my hurt. "I'm very happy with my work, Nathan. Helping people has always been important to me." "Right. Helping everyone except your own family." Before I could respond to this bewildering accusation, Jessica appeared in the doorway. "Grandma Eleanor just arrived. Dad wants everyone in the living room." Nathan stood immediately, pocketing his phone. "We should go." The next hour was excruciating. Eleanor Richards, now in her late 70s, but still imposing with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer outfit, made a show of greeting each person. She embraced David, and Lisa warmly complimented Jessica on her studies and spent several minutes inquiring about Nathan's progress at university. When she finally turned to me, her smile cooled noticeably. "Alma, you're looking well considering everything." "Thank you, Eleanor. You look wonderful as always." "Retirement agrees with me. I've been traveling extensively, just returned from a month in the south of France. You should try to get away sometime. Travel broadens the perspective." The suggestion that I might have the means or opportunity for European vacations was typical Eleanor, a subtle reminder of the lifestyle I had lost by failing to keep her son satisfied. David finally emerged from his study, every inch the successful businessman, in tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater. He greeted his mother effusively, clapped Nathan on the shoulder, kissed Lisa on the cheek, and gave Jessica a quick hug. To me, he offered a curt nod. "Alma, glad you could make it." "David, thank you for hosting." The catering staff announced that dinner was ready, and we moved to the dining room, where a table that could comfortably seat 12 had been set for our party of 6. David naturally took the head of the table, with Lisa and Eleanor flanking him. Nathan positioned himself beside his grandmother, leaving Jessica and me on the other side. As the first course was served, a butternut squash soup that Lisa proudly announced she had made herself. David dominated the conversation with stories of his recent business triumphs. "The Singapore deal finally closed last week," he informed the table. "Largest acquisition in the company's history. The board was so pleased they've approved a bonus structure that will significantly impact my year-end compensation." "That's wonderful, darling," Eleanor beamed. "I always knew you were destined for greatness." "Nathan's been showing real interest in the business," David continued. "I've been mentoring him on investment strategies. He has the Richards instinct." Nathan straightened slightly at this praise, though I noticed he didn't quite meet his father's eyes. "Just trying to learn from the best." David turned his attention to Jessica. "And how's the psychology program? Jess still determined to understand why people do what they do?" Jessica smiled tightly. "It's fascinating, Dad. We're studying family systems theory this semester. how patterns of behavior are established and maintained across generations. I caught the subtle challenge in her comment, but David either missed it or chose to ignore it. Well, as long as you enjoy it. Though with your analytical mind, you might consider law school afterward. There's a partner at my firm whose daughter just made junior partner at 32. Very impressive trajectory. I'll keep my options open, Jessica replied diplomatically. Throughout the meal, I noticed David and Nathan exchanging glances and occasionally whispering when they thought no one was paying attention. Each time, Nathan would look increasingly uncomfortable, while David would wear a slight smile that I recognized all too well from our marriage, the expression he had when he was orchestrating something. The tension in the room continued to build through the main course. David made several pointed comments about my lifestyle choices after the divorce, while Eleanor reminisced about family holidays past, with selective memory that painted me as perpetually inadequate. Lisa tried to smooth over the awkward moments with forced cheerfulness, while Jessica valiantly attempted to steer the conversation to neutral topics. Nathan remained mostly silent, picking at his food and drinking more wine than I'd ever seen him consume. Each time I tried to engage him directly, he would answer minimally before turning to respond to something David or Eleanor had said. As the dessert plates were being cleared, David suggested the traditional Richards family practice of sharing what we were thankful for. In years past, this had been a genuine moment of reflection. Now I braced myself for more veiled barbs. David began. I'm thankful for new beginnings and the opportunity to build a life that truly fulfills me. And of course for Lisa, who understands what partnership really means. Lisa beamed. I'm thankful to be welcomed into this amazing family and for the chance to create new traditions together. Eleanor was next. I'm thankful for my son's continued success and for my grandchildren's bright futures. Family legacy is everything. Nathan shifted in his seat, staring into his wine glass. I'm thankful for clarity, for finally seeing situations and people for what they really are. His gaze flickered to me momentarily, and the hostility there made my chest tighten. Jessica took a deep breath. I'm grateful for education, not just academic learning, but life lessons too. And for the capacity we all have to grow and change and heal, even when it's difficult. All eyes turned to me. I had spent the morning thinking about what I would say at this moment, knowing it might be a rare opportunity to connect genuinely with Nathan. I'm thankful for both of my children, I said, looking first at Jessica, who smiled encouragingly, and then at Nathan, who averted his eyes. I'm thankful for new challenges that have helped me discover strengths I didn't know I had. And I'm thankful for memories, both the joyful ones that sustain me and the painful ones that have taught me important lessons. David snorted softly. Always the martyr, Alma. I'm being sincere, David, I replied, keeping my voice even. The past 3 years have been difficult, but they've also been illuminating. I've learned a lot about myself, about what matters to me. What matters to you clearly wasn't this family, David retorted, or you would have tried harder to preserve it. Jessica interjected. Dad, that's not fair. It's all right, Jessica, I said. Your father and I see our marriage very differently. That's natural. What's natural? David said, his voice taking on the lecturing tone he had always used when he felt challenged, is for a wife to support her husband's ambitions, to create a peaceful home environment, to respect his position as head of the household. What's unnatural is to undermine him at every turn, to question his decisions to make him feel inadequate in his own home. I felt a flash of anger. Is that what you've told the children, that I undermined and disrespected you? Because what I remember is decades of walking on eggshells, of having my opinions dismissed, of being treated like an employee rather than a partner. Here we go, Nathan muttered. Mom's version of history. It's not a version, Nathan, I said, turning to him. It's what happened. Your father and I had very different ideas about marriage and family. Neither of us handled the disconnect well. You never appreciated what he provided for us. Nathan accused, his words slightly slurred from the wine. The house, the cars, the vacations, college without loans. You took all of that for granted. I appreciated everything your father provided materially, I countered. What I couldn't accept was the price constant criticism control over every aspect of our lives, the expectation that my needs and wants would always come last. David stood abruptly, his napkin falling to the floor. I'm not going to sit here and listen to these fabrications. Nathan, come with me for a moment. Nathan rose unsteadily, following his father out of the dining room. Lisa looked stricken, Eleanor smugly vindicated. Jessica reached under the table to squeeze my hand. I'm sorry, I murmured to the table at large. I didn't come here to argue about the past. Then perhaps you shouldn't have brought it up, Eleanor sniffed. Mom was just responding to Dad's accusations, Jessica pointed out. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I could hear the murmur of David's voice from the hallway, though I couldn't make out his words. Nathan's voice occasionally rose in what sounded like protest, followed by more urgent whispering from David. After a few minutes, they returned. David looked composed, even satisfied, while Nathan's face was flushed, his expression a mixture of anger and something like fear. Perhaps we should move to the living room for coffee, Lisa suggested brightly, clearly trying to reset the mood. We all stood, and I began to help gather plates, a habit from years of hosting. Leave it, David said sharply. The staff will handle that. It's no trouble, I replied. I'm just trying to help. Always trying to prove how indispensable you are, David said with a cold smile. Some things never change. I bit my tongue, setting down the plates I had collected. As I turned to follow the others to the living room, I saw David approach Nathan again, placing a hand on his shoulder and leaning in close to whisper something in his ear. Nathan's face contorted briefly before settling into a hard mask of resolve. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Nathan walked directly toward me, his movements stiff and determined. I thought perhaps he wanted to speak privately to continue our disagreement away from the others. I even began to form a conciliatory smile, ready to suggest we take a walk outside to clear our heads. I never got the chance. Before I could process what was happening, Nathan's hand swung through the air and connected with my cheek with stunning force. The crack of the impact silenced the room instantly. The shock and pain sent me stumbling sideways into the table dishes and silverware clattering around me as I struggled to keep my balance. Jessica screamed. Lisa gasped. Eleanor made a small, startled sound. And David stood watching with an expression of grim satisfaction that vanished so quickly I might have imagined it replaced by a show of concern that never reached his eyes. In that suspended moment, as I steadied myself against the table, my cheek burning and my mind reeling, I made a decision that would alter the course of our family forever. I looked up at Nathan, whose face was already transitioning from rage to horror at his own actions, and I smiled. A genuine, sad, knowing smile. Thank you, I said clearly. Nathan took a step back, disoriented by my unexpected response. He had been prepared for tears, for accusations, for a dramatic exit, anything but calm gratitude. What? He stammered, his hand still halfway raised, as if frozen in time. Thank you, I repeated, for showing me exactly what your father has done to you. The room seemed suspended in a bubble of shocked silence. My cheek throbbed where Nathan's hand had connected, but the physical pain was secondary to the emotional earthquake rippling through me. My son, my first child, the baby I had nursed and comforted, the boy I had taught to tie his shoes and ride a bike, had struck me with deliberate force. And yet, looking at his confused face, I felt a strange clarity breaking through my shock. Nathan took another step back, his expression cycling rapidly between anger, confusion, and the first flickers of shame. You... David moved forward, placing a hand on Nathan's shoulder. Alma, you've clearly upset him with your accusations. Perhaps it would be best if you left. I straightened, fully ignoring the shattered plate at my feet. No, David, I don't think I will leave. Not this time. Jessica rushed to my side, her face pale with shock. Mom, are you okay, Nathan? What the hell were you thinking? Nathan's eyes darted between his father and me, like a cornered animal seeking escape. She's been lying about Dad for years. She's the reason everything fell apart. Dad told me how she... Dad told you what exactly? I interrupted, maintaining that same calm smile that seemed to unnerve him. That I was a terrible wife, that I didn't appreciate him, that I held him back from greater success. What specific words did he whisper to you just now? Nathan, that made you think it was acceptable to hit your mother? David's facade of concern hardened into something colder. Don't try to twist this, Alma. Nathan is a grown man making his own choices. If he's angry with you, perhaps you should examine why. Oh, I know exactly why, I replied, not taking my eyes off Nathan. Because for 3 years, you've been feeding him a carefully edited version of our marriage. You've painted me as the villain and yourself as the victim, just like you did throughout our relationship. It's what you do, David. You reshape reality to suit your narrative. This is absurd, David scoffed, looking to his mother and Lisa for support. Nathan is simply expressing the frustration we've all felt with Alma's self-pitying revisionist history. Lisa, to her credit, looked distinctly uncomfortable. David, maybe we should all take a moment to calm down. I am calm, I said, and realized it was true. Despite the circumstances, I felt steadier than I had in years. Nathan, I want you to think carefully. In all the years you lived in our home, did you ever see me raise a hand to you, to Jessica, to your father? Nathan swallowed hard, his anger visibly deflating. No, but... Did you ever see me throw things in anger, break items, punch walls, slam doors? No. Now think about your father. Did you ever see him do those things? David interjected. This is ridiculous. I never hit anyone. You didn't have to, I replied, finally turning to face him. You controlled us in other ways, with money, with criticism, with silent treatments that could last for days, with threats both veiled and explicit, with constantly shifting expectations that ensured we could never quite please you. Nathan's face had gone pale. Dad wouldn't... Nathan? Jessica said quietly. You know she's telling the truth. Remember the time Dad threw his laptop across the room because Mom bought the wrong brand of coffee, or when he didn't speak to either of us for a week because we went to visit Mom's sister without asking his permission first? That's not the same as hitting someone, Nathan protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Violence takes many forms, I said gently. What you just did, Nathan, that's what your father taught you, even if he never demonstrated that specific action. He taught you that when a woman doesn't behave as you want, when she challenges your version of events, she deserves punishment. Eleanor, who had been watching the scene unfold with visible discomfort, finally spoke. This has gone far enough. Nathan made a mistake in the heat of the moment. There's no need to turn this into a referendum on David's character. A mistake, I echoed. Is that what we're calling it? If Nathan had slapped Lisa, would we dismiss it as a mistake? If David had hit you, Eleanor, would that be acceptable? Eleanor flinched. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes, recognition perhaps, or a long-buried memory. I had always wondered about her marriage to David's father, a stern, successful man who had died before I met David. The dynamics had seemed eerily familiar. What I want to know, I continued looking back at Nathan, is what exactly your father whispered to you before you hit me. What words could possibly justify that action? Nathan looked at the floor, then at his father, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. It doesn't matter. I shouldn't have done it. It matters very much, I insisted. Because I don't believe for 1 second that this was your idea. The Nathan I raised, the Nathan I know, would never strike anyone, let alone his mother. You don't know me anymore, Nathan muttered, but the defiance in his voice was crumbling. I know you better than you think, I said. I know that right now you're feeling ashamed and confused. You're wondering how you could have done something so contrary to your own values. You're trying to rationalize it by telling yourself, I deserved it somehow. But deep down, you know there's no justification. David cut in, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Enough amateur psychology, Alma. If Nathan regrets his actions, let him apologize and we can move past this unfortunate incident. Unfortunate incident, Jessica repeated incredulously. My brother just slapped my mother across the face hard enough to knock her into the table, and you're calling it an unfortunate incident. Dad, what is wrong with you? Watch your tone, Jessica, David warned. Or what? Jessica challenged. Will you suggest Nathan hit me next? No one is hitting anyone, Lisa suddenly interjected, her voice stronger than I'd heard it all day. This has gone completely off the rails. Everyone turned to look at her in surprise. Lisa had been a mostly decorative presence throughout the day, deferring to David and trying to maintain the appearance of the perfect hostess. Now she stood with her arms crossed, looking genuinely disturbed. David, I think you need to be honest about what you said to Nathan, she continued. I saw you whisper to him right before he did that to Alma. David's expression darkened. Lisa, this doesn't concern you. It absolutely concerns me, she replied. I'm not going to stand here and watch a family tear itself apart over Thanksgiving dinner without saying something. Nathan was watching this exchange with growing confusion. Dad didn't tell me to hit her, he said, but his voice wavered. He just reminded me of how she abandoned us, how she chose herself over our family. Is that what he said? I asked softly. Those exact words. Nathan hesitated. He said you were trying to rewrite history again, making yourself the victim when you were really the villain. He said someone needed to finally stand up to you, to show you that you couldn't manipulate us anymore. And you interpreted that as permission to hit me. I wasn't thinking. Nathan's voice trailed off his face, a mask of confusion and mounting horror. You weren't thinking. I agreed. You were reacting to years of subtle and not so subtle messaging from your father, that I was the enemy, that I deserved punishment, that standing up to me meant putting me in my place. David's facade of concern had completely vanished, now replaced by cold fury. This is exactly the kind of manipulative nonsense I warned you about, Nathan. She twists. Everything, makes herself the martyr, turns you against me. Is that what I'm doing, David? I asked, turning to face him fully. Or am I finally standing up for myself after decades of allowing you to define our reality? For years, I stayed silent while you criticized and controlled me. I even stayed silent when you turned Nathan against me after the divorce. But I won't stay silent about this. Not when your poisonous influence has led our son to become someone he was never meant to be. Jessica moved to stand beside me, a united front against David's growing anger. Dad, what Mom is saying makes sense. Think about it, Nathan. All those conversations with Dad about how Mom abandoned the family. Did he ever mention that he was the one who asked for the divorce? Did he tell you how he hid assets during the settlement to ensure Mom would struggle financially? Did he explain how he threatened to contest custody of me, even though I was 17, just to hurt Mom? Nathan looked stricken. That's not... He said Mom wanted out, that she was unhappy with our lifestyle, that she resented his success. And you believed him without ever asking for my side, I said gently. Because he's always been the authority figure, the one who defined truth in this family. I understand Nathan. I believed him too for many years. I believed I was inadequate, overly emotional, ungrateful. It took me a long time to realize that his version of reality was designed to maintain his control. Eleanor, who had been watching the exchange with increasing discomfort, suddenly rose from her seat. I think I should call my car service. This is not the Thanksgiving I anticipated. Mother, please stay, David said, a note of desperation entering his voice. Alma is clearly determined to ruin the day with her delusions. Eleanor looked at her son for a long moment, then at me, then at Nathan, who still stood frozen in the aftermath of his actions. I don't think these are delusions, David. I think perhaps there are uncomfortable truths being spoken, and I find I don't have the stomach for it today. She gathered her purse and turned to me. Alma, I owe you an apology. Not just for today, but for years of accepting David's characterization of you without question. It was convenient to believe him. She paused, something vulnerable flashing across her usually composed features. It was easier than recognizing patterns I've spent a lifetime pretending not to see. With that cryptic statement, Eleanor left the click of her heels on the marble foyer, fading into silence. David stared after his mother, momentarily speechless. When he turned back to the room, his expression had hardened into something ugly. Well done, Alma. You've managed to turn even my mother against me. I didn't turn anyone against you, David, I replied. I simply stopped allowing you to turn them against me. Nathan had sunk into a dining chair, his head in his hands. I hit my mother, he whispered, as if just fully realizing what he had done. I actually hit my mother. I moved toward him, slowly, cautiously aware that he was in the midst of a profound internal crisis. Kneeling beside his chair, I placed a hand on his arm. Nathan, look at me. He raised his head, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. What you did was wrong, I said firmly. It was a violation of everything I taught you, everything I believe you truly value, but I understand how it happened. You've been caught in the crossfire of a toxic dynamic that began long before you were born. Your father learned these patterns from his father, and he passed them to you. The question is whether you'll continue the cycle. I never wanted to be the kind of man who hits women, Nathan said, his voice breaking. I don't know how I could have. Dad said you were destroying our family again, and I just felt so angry. Your father has always been very skilled at directing other people's anger where it serves him best, I said. But Nathan, you're an adult now. You get to decide who you listen to, what kind of man you want to be. David's voice cut through the moment. This is absurd. Nathan, don't let her manipulate you. You made a mistake, yes, but she's using it to drive a wedge between us just like she's always done. Is that what I'm doing, David? I asked, rising to face him again. Or are you finally seeing your carefully constructed narrative collapse? For years, you've told the children that I was the problem in our marriage. You've painted yourself as the victim of my inadequacies. But violence reveals truth, doesn't it? Nathan's action today, the action you encouraged with your whispered incitement, shows exactly what kind of influence you've had on him. Lisa had moved to stand near the doorway, as if preparing for a quick exit if necessary. David, I think Alma is right. The way you've talked about her since I've known you, it's always made me uncomfortable. And today when I saw your face. You looked satisfied. David's expression flickered between rage and calculation. Lisa, don't be ridiculous. I was shocked just like everyone else. No, Jessica interjected. I saw it too, Dad, just for a second before you hit it. You were pleased. This is insanity, David sputtered. You're all turning against me based on some imagined facial expression after everything I've done for this family. What exactly have you done, David? I asked quietly. Provided financially, yes. Given the children material advantages, certainly. But at what cost to their emotional well-being? At what cost to their understanding of healthy relationships? Nathan stood suddenly. I need some air. Nathan, wait, David began. No, Dad. I need to think. I need space right now. He looked at me, naked anguish in his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I know, I said simply. Take the time you need. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be there. Nathan nodded once, then walked out the front door, closing behind him with a soft click. David rounded on me the moment Nathan was gone. Are you satisfied now? You've ruined Thanksgiving, turned my son against me, embarrassed me in front of my mother and Lisa. This is exactly why our marriage failed, your constant need for drama, for attention, for sympathy. I laughed then, a genuine laugh born not of humor, but of liberation. Oh, David, you still don't see it, do you? Our marriage didn't fail because I needed attention. It failed because you needed control. And for the first time since I've known you, that control is slipping. I turned to Jessica. I think it's time for us to go, honey. Jessica nodded, looking relieved. I'll get your coat. You're not going anywhere, David said, stepping toward me with an expression I recognized all too well, the look he got when he felt his authority being challenged. We're going to resolve this now as a family. No, David, I said firmly. We're not. Jessica and I are leaving. Nathan needs time to process what happened. And you need to take a hard look at the damage your need for control has done to everyone around you. Lisa spoke up again, her voice stronger now. David, I think it's best if they go. This situation needs to cool down. David turned to her, betrayal etched on his features. To Lisa, I expected this kind of disloyalty from Alma and Jessica, but not from you. Lisa flinched, but stood her ground. This isn't about loyalty, David. It's about what's right. What happened today was wrong, and your reaction to it was disturbing. Jessica returned with my coat and purse. Ready, Mom? I nodded, allowing her to help me into my coat. My cheek was still throbbing, and I suspected a bruise was already forming. But the physical pain seemed inconsequential compared to the emotional watershed of the last half hour. Alma, David called as we reached the foyer. I turned back to look at him. For just a moment, beneath the anger and indignation, I caught a glimpse of something else, fear perhaps, or the dawning realization that his carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and controlled once more. No, I agreed. But it's changing, David, and that's long overdue. As Jessica and I stepped out into the crisp November air, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. The day had been traumatic, yes, but also revelatory. Nathan's action, horrible as it was, had brought long-buried truths to the surface. And in the harsh light of that truth, the first fragile seeds of healing might finally have room to grow. Jessica drove us back to my apartment in silence, occasionally glancing at me with concern. My cheek had begun to swell, a dull throb pulsing in time with my heartbeat. But the physical pain was secondary to the emotional maelstrom I was struggling to process. My son had hit me. The reality of it kept crashing over me in waves, each one threatening to pull me under. As we entered my small apartment, Jessica immediately went to the freezer and wrapped some ice in a kitchen towel. Put this on your cheek, Mom. It'll help with the swelling. I obeyed, automatically, the cold a welcome distraction from the chaos of my thoughts. Thank you, sweetheart. Jessica busied herself making tea, her movements precise and controlled in the way they always became when she was upset, but trying to maintain composure. Finally, with steaming mugs placed on the coffee table, She sat beside me on the couch. "I can't believe Nathan did that," she said softly. "I keep seeing it happen over and over in my mind, and it doesn't make sense. That's not who he is." I adjusted the ice pack, wincing slightly. "It's not who I raised him to be," I agreed. "But it is who your father has been shaping him to become." Jessica wrapped her hands around her mug, staring into the steam. "I knew Dad was feeding him a distorted version of the divorce, but I never imagined it would lead to this." "Your father has always been skilled at manipulation," I said. "He doesn't just tell outright lies that would be too obvious. He twists the truth, emphasizes certain aspects while completely omitting others until the narrative serves his purposes." "But why turn Nathan against you? What does he gain from that?" I considered the question, trying to articulate something I had only recently come to understand myself. "Control, primarily. Your father's greatest fear has always been losing control of his environment, of his image, of the people around him. When I finally left the marriage, it represented the ultimate loss of control for him. He couldn't stand the idea that I had made that choice independently, that I had rejected the life he created. So he tried to ensure he didn't lose Nathan too." "Yes, but it's more than that. By turning Nathan against me, he accomplishes several things at once. He punishes me for leaving. He reinforces his own narrative that I was the problem in our marriage. And he binds Nathan to him through a kind of toxic loyalty, us against her." Jessica shook her head. "It's so twisted, and the worst part is it almost worked. Nathan's been like Dad's shadow for the past 3 years. It did work," I corrected gently. "Until today." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the day settling around us. Outside, the early winter darkness had fallen, and I could see Christmas lights beginning to appear in neighboring windows. The contrast between the festive scene and the emotional devastation of our Thanksgiving struck me as particularly cruel. "Mom," Jessica said hesitantly, "can I ask you something? Why did you smile after Nathan? After he hit you? You smiled and thanked him. I don't understand." I lowered the ice pack, setting it on a coaster. In that moment, when I was recovering from the shock, I had a choice to make. I could react with anger, with tears, with dramatic accusations, all responses that would have played into your father's narrative of me as emotionally unstable and manipulative. Or I could do something unexpected, something that would break the script. The smile. Yes, but it wasn't just a tactical decision. In that terrible moment, I had a sudden clarity. I saw exactly what your father had done, not just to me over the years, but to Nathan. I saw how he had poisoned our son's mind, twisted his natural protective instincts, corrupted his understanding of masculinity and strength. And I felt a strange gratitude for the revelation, painful as it was. Because you can't heal what you can't see clearly. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I could have been that insightful in the moment. I was just horrified. Of course you were. Any normal person would be. But I've had 3 years of therapy since the divorce, Jess. 3 years of untangling the web of manipulation and control that defined my marriage to your father. I've been preparing for a moment like this in some ways, without ever expecting it would come in such a violent form. Do you think Nathan will be okay? I sighed deeply. I don't know. Today was a turning point for him, a moment when the person he's been becoming under your father's influence collided violently with the person I raised him to be. That's a profound psychological shock. How he processes it, what he does next. That will determine a lot. Should we call him? Not yet, I said. He needs time to think, to sit with what he did, without either of us trying to influence his understanding of it. When he's ready, he'll reach out. Jessica nodded, then suddenly looked up as a thought struck her. Mom, should we report this to the police, I mean? What Nathan did was assault. The question caught me off guard, though it shouldn't have. Of course, what Nathan did was technically a crime. As a social worker, I had encouraged countless women to report domestic violence to press charges against partners who had struck them. The fact that the perpetrator in this case was my son complicated my feelings immeasurably. I don't think involving the legal system would help at this point, I said slowly. Nathan isn't a danger to me or to others. This wasn't a pattern of behavior. It was a terrible, isolated incident born from years of manipulation. What he needs now is clarity and healing, not punishment. Are you sure Dad might try to spin this to rewrite what happened? Your father will absolutely try to rewrite what happened, I agreed. But the truth was witnessed by too many people this time. You, Lisa, even Eleanor seemed to recognize something fundamental about the dynamic. His ability to control the narrative is weakening. My phone buzzed with a text message. I picked it up, half expecting it to be Nathan. Instead, it was from an unknown number. Alma, this is Lisa. I got your number from Jessica's phone a while back in case of emergency. I wanted to check if you're okay and to say I'm so sorry about what happened today. I had no idea things would escalate like that. I've never seen David the way he was after you left. Can we talk sometime? I showed the message to Jessica. Interesting, she said. I always thought Lisa was just another of Dad's trophies, but she actually seemed disturbed by his behavior today. People are complex, I replied, typing a brief response to Lisa, thanking her for reaching out and agreeing to talk soon. Your father doesn't choose partners who challenge him, but that doesn't mean they don't eventually develop their own perspectives. Do you think she'll leave him? I don't know. That's her journey to navigate. But I suspect today opened her eyes to aspects of your father's character she had previously missed or dismissed. Jessica yawned suddenly, the emotional exhaustion of the day catching up with her. I should head back to my dorm, but I don't want to leave you alone tonight. I'll be fine, sweetheart, I assured her. Really. Go home, get some rest. We can talk more tomorrow. After Jessica reluctantly left, I moved around my apartment in a daze, going through the motions of my evening routine without fully registering my actions. As I washed my face, carefully avoiding the tender spot on my cheek, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. A bruise was forming a mottled purple stain spreading across my cheekbone. I stared at it, transfixed by this physical manifestation of the day's emotional wounds. Memories flooded back not just of today's violence, but of the subtler forms of abuse that had characterized my marriage to David. The constant criticism disguised as helpful suggestions. The silent treatments when I failed to meet his expectations. The way he would question my recollection of events until I doubted my own perceptions. The financial control that kept me dependent even as he complained about my lack of contribution to the family. For years, I had rationalized his behavior. He's under stress at work. He had a difficult childhood. He just wants what's best for the family. I need to try harder to understand his perspective. The familiar litany of excuses that had kept me trapped in a marriage that slowly eroded my sense of self. What frightened me most was how easily Nathan had slipped into his father's patterns. The look in his eyes just before he struck me, contempt, righteous anger, absolute certainty in his moral authority, had been pure David. In that moment, my son had become a stranger, a vessel for his father's toxic influence. And yet, unlike David, Nathan had shown immediate remorse. The horror that dawned on his face as he realized what he had done. The genuine anguish in his apology. These were signs that the gentle boy I had raised still existed beneath the layers of his father's programming. As I climbed into bed, my phone chimed with another text message. My heart raced as I saw it was from Nathan. Mom, I don't know how to begin to apologize for what I did. There's no excuse. None. I've never felt more disgusted with myself. I need some time to sort through everything, but I want you to know I'm so sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I read the message several times, relief and cautious hope mingling with the lingering hurt. After careful consideration, I replied, "Nathan, what happened today was deeply painful, but I believe it can become a turning point if you let it. Take the time you need. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be here. I love you. That hasn't changed." I set the phone aside and lay back against my pillows, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges explaining my bruised face at work, fielding inevitable calls from David supporting Jessica as she processed her own reactions to the family implosion. But for now, in the quiet darkness of my bedroom, I allowed myself to feel a glimmer of hope that something broken might be beginning to heal. My last thought before drifting into an exhausted sleep was of my mother, Margaret Thompson, who had died 10 years earlier. Mom had been a quiet, steadfast woman who rarely spoke ill of anyone, but she had pulled me aside after first meeting David during our college years. "That young man has charm and ambition to spare, Alma," she had said. "But remember, this true strength never needs to diminish others to feel powerful. True love builds up, it doesn't tear down." I hadn't understood then what she was trying to tell me. Now, with the wisdom of hard experience, her words resonated with painful clarity. And I wondered if perhaps she had recognized in David something familiar from her own life, some pattern she had hoped I might avoid. If so, I had failed to heed her warning. But perhaps it wasn't too late for Nathan to learn what had taken me decades to understand, that true strength lies not in control or dominance, but in the courage to face difficult truths and the determination to become a better person than your past might have shaped you to be. The following morning, I awoke to find my cheek had blossomed into an impressive bruise, purple and yellow, spreading from my cheekbone down toward my jaw. Thanksgiving's violence was literally written on my face. I called in sick to work, not ready to field well-meaning questions from colleagues. By mid-morning, I had received several text messages, Jessica checking in, Lisa asking if we could meet for coffee sometime next week, and surprisingly, Eleanor Richards requesting my address so she could send a proper note. Nothing from David, which was both a relief and concerning his silence rarely boded well. Around noon, a tentative knock at my door startled me. I peered through the peephole, shocked to see Nathan standing in the hallway. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. His normally neat appearance rumpled, as if he'd slept in his clothes. I hesitated only briefly before opening the door. "Nathan?" "Mom." His eyes immediately fixed on my bruised cheek, and he visibly flinched. "Oh God, I did that." "Would you like to come in?" I asked, stepping aside. He entered cautiously, as if expecting recrimination at any moment. In my small living room, he stood awkwardly, seemingly uncertain whether he was allowed to sit. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch. I took the armchair across from him, giving us both space. Nathan perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped between his knees. "I didn't know if you'd let me in." "I said I would be here when you were ready to talk," I reminded him gently. "Yeah." He swallowed hard. "I don't know where to begin." "Why don't we start with what brought you here today? I wasn't expecting to see you so soon." Nathan ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing it happen over and over. The look on your face when I hit you. I've never hated myself more than I did in that moment." "What did you do after you left yesterday?" "I drove around for hours. Ended up at the harbor just sitting in my car watching the water. I tried to understand how I could have done something so contrary to everything I believe about myself." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I've always thought of myself as a good person, you know. Someone who respects women, who would never hurt anyone. And then in one moment, I destroyed that self-image completely. I nodded, encouraging him to continue. I kept thinking about what you said about Dad manipulating me, about him turning me against you. At first, I wanted to reject it completely, but the more I thought about our conversations over the last 3 years, the things he's told me about you, about the divorce, I started to see patterns. What kind of patterns? I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. The way he always frames things as you versus him. The way he emphasizes how much he's done for me financially while subtly pointing out your limited means. How he always has some story about how you undermined him during the marriage, but when I try to remember these incidents myself, the details are fuzzy or completely different from how I remember them. Nathan paused, visibly struggling. And the way he encourages my anger toward you, nurtures it almost while positioning himself as the reasonable one who's just concerned about your influence. I felt a profound sadness listening to Nathan articulate the manipulation tactics I had experienced throughout my marriage. That's a difficult realization. Yesterday before what happened, do you know what he whispered to me? Nathan's voice dropped, shame evident in every syllable. He said, "She's never going to stop trying to poison this family against me. Someone needs to shut her up for good." And somehow in that moment, with all the tension and the wine and years of him telling me you were the source of all our problems, I translated that into permission to hit you. "Nathan, what you did was wrong," I said firmly. "There's no justification for violence, especially against someone who poses no physical threat to you. But I understand the context that made such an uncharacteristic action possible." "How can you be so calm about this?" he asked, genuine bewilderment in his expression. "You should be furious. You should be calling the police. You should never want to see me again." Would any of those reactions help us heal? Would they help you understand how you got to that moment, or how to ensure it never happens again? Nathan shook his head slowly. "I don't deserve your compassion." "This isn't about what you deserve," I explained. "It's about what will lead to healing for you, for me, for our relationship. Rage and punishment won't accomplish that." "That's why you smiled," he said suddenly. "After I hit you, you smiled and said thank you. I couldn't understand it. It was like you'd gone into shock or something." In a way, I had, but not the kind of shock you mean. It was a moment of absolute clarity. I saw exactly what had happened, not just the physical act, but the years of manipulation that led to it. And I was grateful in a strange way, because it made visible something that had been hidden for so long. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, digesting this. "After I left yesterday, Dad called me about a dozen times. When I finally answered, he was different, calculating. He suggested we get our story straight before talking to anyone else about what happened. He kept emphasizing that you had provoked me, that anyone would have reacted the same way, that we needed to present a united front against your distortions." "And how did that make you feel?" "Sick," Nathan admitted. "Literally nauseated, because I started to see what you meant about him reshaping reality. He was already rewriting what had happened, casting me as the victim of your provocations rather than what I actually was." "Which was what? A grown man who physically assaulted his mother because he couldn't handle her speaking her truth." The words seemed to cost him enormously. I nodded, acknowledging both his insight and his courage in articulating it. "And how did you respond to your father's call?" "I told him I needed space to think. He didn't like that. Started talking about all he's done for me, the job he's holding for me at his firm after graduation, the connections he's fostered on my behalf. When I still insisted on taking some time, he got angry. Said I was being ungrateful, that I was letting you manipulate me just like you'd manipulated him for years." "That sounds familiar," I said quietly. "Yeah, I bet it does." Nathan ran his hands over his face. Mom, I'm starting to see so many things differently. Not just about yesterday, but about the last 3 years. The way Dad has positioned himself as my benefactor, my mentor, my path to success. The way he's made me dependent on his approval and financial support. The way he's isolated me from you, and even from Jessica, to some extent. These are painful realizations, I acknowledged. The thing is, I don't know what to do now. Dad's been everything to me since the divorce. My advisor, my financial support, my connection to internships and future jobs. If I step back from that relationship, I feel like I'm jumping off a cliff without knowing what's below. I leaned forward slightly, careful not to invade his space. Nathan, those are legitimate concerns. Your father has deliberately created a situation where you feel dependent on him, but you're incredibly intelligent, hardworking, and capable. Your path forward doesn't have to be the one he's laid out for you. I don't even know what I want anymore, Nathan confessed. I've been so focused on pleasing Dad, on being the son he wants me to be, that I've lost track of my own desires and values. That's a common effect of being in a controlling relationship, I said. The good news is that recognition is the first step toward reclaiming your autonomy. Nathan nodded slowly, then looked directly at me for the first time since sitting down. Mom, I need to say something, and I need you to hear it. I am profoundly, desperately sorry for what I did yesterday. It was inexcusable, unforgivable, and completely contrary to the man I want to be. I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never ever do anything like that again, to you or to anyone. The raw sincerity in his voice brought tears to my eyes. Thank you for that, Nathan. I believe you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm going to get help. I've already called the University Counseling Center and set up an emergency appointment for Monday. I'm proud of you for taking that step, I said. It shows tremendous courage and self-awareness. I also think I need to take some distance from Dad for a while. I need to figure out what's true and what's manipulation, what I actually want versus what he's convinced me to want. How do you think he'll react to that? Nathan grimaced. Not well. He's already threatened to cut off financial support if I take your side, as he puts it. He sees this as a competition, and he expects absolute loyalty. Are you prepared for that possibility, that he might follow through on those threats? I don't know, Nathan admitted. The thought terrifies me, especially with just 1 semester left before graduation. But I also know I can't keep going like this. Yesterday showed me what I'm capable of when I blindly follow his lead, and it sickens me. I considered for a moment. Nathan, if it comes to that, if your father does cut you off financially, we'll figure something out. I don't have much, but I can help with some expenses. There are loans, scholarships, work options. The point is, you're not as trapped as he wants you to believe. I've been such a terrible son to you these past few years, Nathan said, his voice breaking. The things I've said, the way I've treated you, and you're still willing to help me. You're my child, Nathan. That hasn't changed. Yes, you've hurt me deeply both yesterday and in the years since the divorce, but I understand the context that shaped your behavior, and I see your genuine remorse and desire to change. I don't know how to move forward from here, he admitted. One day at a time, I suggested. Get the help you've already arranged. Take the space you need from your father. Be honest with yourself about what you're feeling and what you want. And maybe when you're ready, we can start rebuilding our relationship on a healthier foundation. Nathan nodded, wiping at his eyes. I'd like that, if you're willing. I am, I assured him. But Nathan, I need you to understand something important. I can forgive you for yesterday, and I can work with you to heal our relationship, but I will not put myself in a position to be hurt like that again by you or by anyone. My compassion doesn't mean I don't have boundaries. Of course, he said quickly. I wouldn't expect anything less. We talked for another hour, covering painful ground but necessary terrain. Nathan shared more about how David had systematically turned him against me after the divorce, using a combination of selective storytelling, financial incentives, and appeals to masculine solidarity. I offered clarification on events from our family history that David had distorted, careful not to simply replace his narrative with my own, but to acknowledge the complexity of truth and perception. As Nathan prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Jessica knows I'm here. She wants us all to get together this weekend, the three of us. Would that be okay? I'd like that, I said. Tell her to call me and we'll arrange something. After he left, I sat quietly in my living room processing the unexpected turn events had taken. Yesterday, I had experienced one of the most shocking and painful moments of my life. Today, I had witnessed the first fragile steps toward healing. The contrast was almost too much to absorb. My phone rang, displaying David's number. After a moment's hesitation, I declined the call. Whatever he had to say could wait until I felt ready to hear it. For now, I needed to focus on my own healing and on supporting Nathan and Jessica through this family earthquake. A text came through almost immediately. We need to talk about what happened. Nathan isn't answering my calls. This situation is getting out of hand. I typed a brief response. I'm not ready to speak with you yet. When I am, it will be with clear boundaries in place. Then I silenced my phone and went to make a cup of tea, carrying with me a cautious but genuine